The girl who rejected me in college came on to me at a party 2 years later, so I rejected her back. It destroyed her ego, and now all her friends are attacking me. I always thought I was a bit of a late bloomer. Growing up, my focus was always on academics. I wasn't one of those naturally gifted kids who breezed through classes with minimal effort. I had to grind, study long hours, and make sure I stayed on top of things. It wasn't glamorous or easy, but it paid off. My parents, supportive as they were, always encouraged me to keep my nose to the grindstone, and so I did. My social life wasn't much of a priority during that time. I had my circle of friends, but it was clear that most of my energy went into school. When I entered college, the pressure lifted a little, but I still found myself buried in assignments and exams. However, it was around my sophomore year when things started to change. I finally felt like I could breathe, like I was allowed to experience life beyond the classroom. That's when I noticed Nat. She was part of my extended social circle. Someone I always saw at parties, at lunch with friends, but we didn't really talk much at first. She was always laughing, vibrant, and one of those people who seemed to light up the room. There was something magnetic about her, and over time, I couldn't help but develop a crush. But this was college, and I was still figuring out how to navigate relationships, especially with someone like Nat. Eventually, after weeks of gathering courage, I asked her out. To my surprise, she laughed. She explained that she wasn't laughing at me, but that it had just come out of nowhere. The laugh stuck with me even though she said it wasn't what I thought. She politely declined, saying she wasn't dating anyone at the moment. I took it in stride, though it stung more than I wanted to admit. In my mind, the situation was clear. She was probably dating someone else, just not me. The sting didn't last long. I had other things to focus on, and as college went on, I found ways to move on from it. I landed a job after graduation, and it wasn't too long before I realized I had done well enough to leave my small hometown behind. The new job took me to a new city, and it felt like a fresh start. I hadn't really thought about Nat much in the years that followed, not until the time I spent with Tony and Steve. Tony and Steve were in their 30s and took me under their wing. They were both a little older, more experienced, and much more social than I was. They dragged me to the gym, where they joked about me looking like a twig, and honestly, they weren't wrong. Over the course of 2 years, I found myself growing, not just in muscle but in confidence. When we went out, they were the best wingmen. They pushed me out of my shell, encouraging me to talk to people, to open up. I still had my awkward moments, but I wasn't the same socially inept guy I was a few years ago. I became better at reading the room, better at holding conversations, and much more at ease in social settings. Then, a few years later, I got the chance to move back home. My company agreed to let me work remotely as long as I made regular trips back to the office. It felt good to return to familiar ground, even if things were different now. I kept my routine, kept myself busy, but life was easier now, simpler in a way. I had a little more freedom, a little more time for myself. It was during a regular trip to the grocery store that I ran into Nat. It had been years since we'd last seen each other, and I had no idea what she had been up to. When I spotted her in the produce section, I could tell she was doing well. She had a child with her, and she seemed content. We exchanged pleasantries, and I learned that she was raising the kid on her own. She didn't dive into specifics, but it was clear she had her life together. A few weeks later, we ended up at the same party. This time, things were different. Nat approached me, and we exchanged a few words before she surprised me by asking when I was going to ask her out again. I couldn't believe it. The same girl who had laughed at my proposition years ago, the same one who had turned me down, was now interested. I didn't hesitate. She wasn't the same person I remembered, and I certainly wasn't the same either. I told her it hadn't crossed my mind. It wasn't a rejection, but a simple truth. The look on her face shifted. She seemed offended, and before I knew it, I found myself leaving the conversation. I wasn't going to entertain whatever this was. She had already rejected me once, and I wasn't about to let my past feelings come rushing back just because she now wanted something different. I expected that to be the end of it, but Nat wasn't done. She found me later at the party, cornered me, and asked why I wasn't interested in her anymore. Her question felt almost surreal. I told her that it wasn't about her being a single mom, it wasn't about any of the things she probably thought. It was simple. She had rejected me years ago, and I hadn't thought about her romantically since. In fact, I had moved on, and in my mind that chapter was closed. Her response caught me off guard. She accused me of being shallow, of not giving her a chance now that she was in a different place. I told her it wasn't about that, it was about how she had handled things back then, and honestly, I wasn't the same person anymore. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone, especially not her. But what happened next made everything more complicated. Nat's friends started blowing up my phone. The messages weren't just about her, they were about me. They were upset, accusing me of being immature and cruel. I couldn't understand why it was such a big deal. They didn't understand that I wasn't interested. It wasn't a personal attack, just a simple decision. Yet, the pressure mounted and I felt the need to resolve the situation. I spoke with my sister about it, trying to make sense of the situation. After a long conversation, I decided to reach out to Nat. I asked if she would meet me for coffee just to talk things through. I wanted to clear the air, to explain that this wasn't some grudge I was holding, but a matter of personal boundaries. She agreed and we set up a time. When we met, Nat arrived late. She apologized, explaining that she had to deal with some issues related to her son. We sat down and talked and I could tell she was trying to be open. She told me that the past few weeks had been tough for her too. She had been dating again and it hadn't gone well. One of the last people she'd been involved with had rejected her harshly because of her situation as a single mom. It was fresh and I could see how much it had hurt her. She apologized for her behavior at the party, for the way she had reacted. She admitted that she had been trying to flirt with me, but when I rejected her, the old wounds from her past rejection flared up, and she acted out. She told me about the pressure from her friends, how they had tried to help smooth things over, not out of malice but out of loyalty to her. In that moment, I realized how much of this had been about misunderstanding. She wasn't trying to hurt me, she was reacting to her own feelings of rejection. We both apologized for the way things had unfolded. It wasn't about dating anymore, it was about clearing the air and understanding each other. We both agreed that we weren't interested in dating each other. But we also acknowledged that if circumstances ever changed, if the timing were right, maybe we would give it another shot. But for now, things were fine as they were. We left that conversation with a sense of closure, and in a way, I felt lighter. The storm that had started from a single rejection had finally settled.